Alright, I'm just recording a short video. It's Thursday, August 10, 2017. It's 4:11 p.m. I'm on Southbridge Road in Warren, near the center of town, actually driving out of town right now. So the reason why I'm doing this video is so I have it documented in my own words. What just happened, I just left from getting a public records request of the August 2017 registered voter list from the Warren Town Clerk's office. Nancy Lowell and her assistant were there. So anyhow, I just had I feel that I had a comfortable conversation with Nancy Lowell, the Warren, Mass. Town Clerk. I left the building just 2 or 3 minutes ago because her attitude changed, and that's what I wanted to document on video to myself or to my lawyer. So I'm still driving on Southbridge Road out of Warren right now. I'm trying to actually get out of town in case she calls the police. So I just confronted her. Not confronted her, but I just said I wanted to talk, and she says about what, and I just says about some signs. So I mentioned to her about Brian Corvo's signs that were stolen off private property, and I told her that I had the audio CD of town council knowingly know that they were Ken Lacey, the tree warden, and I'm trying to say. And then Chairman Robert Downing ordered the signs to be stolen. So this is the start of the conversation after I paid for my records request, and I bought a street listing book. So I wrote her 2 checks, and I just said we need to talk. And so I told her about that story, and she just says, well, what does it have to do with me or my office? And I just says, well, what's your opinion on Bob Downing ordering the signs to be stolen? And I says, since you're the town clerk's office, I says, is that illegal? Is that an unlawful act or a legal act, meaning that town employees have the right to commit larceny and steal somebody else's campaign signs? And her answer was no comment to that. I don't have the paperwork with me, but she seemed to have no interest and didn't care that I mentioned that. And then she said, do I have proof? And I says, yeah. And I says, town council knew that town employees were stealing signs. So I then mentioned in my election about my 39 or so signs of mine were stolen in the 2015 election, and I told her that it's alleged that they were police employees. And her response to that was, and that's why I'm doing this video, so this way it's fresh in my mind what she just told me to my face with her assistant town clerk sitting there. So she just didn't have an answer for that either. And I says, is it right for town employees or police officers to steal signs? And I says, isn't that those town employees tampering with the campaign and or the election process? And it's also theft, which is larceny, which is a criminal offense. And she says, oh, I don't know, you'd have to ask the chief of police on that. And I says, well, the chief of police is allegedly known to have known that they were going to steal my signs. And it was, by the opposite side, which was James GAGNER and town people that knew that my signs were to be stolen. And of course she just shrugged her, she looked at me right in the face and just shrugged her shoulders and says, what do you want me to say? And I just says, can I file a complaint? And she says no. So she won't even, so in other words, she knows that the evidence is bad and it incriminates other co-worker friends, not in the municipal building, but within the town, and she, won't do anything. No, so I told her several times in this, voice that I'm speaking now, I just want to inform you with this. I'm not, saying any threats. I says, I'm not mad at your office. I'm not mad at you. Then I talked about the inappropriateness of of Jim Fountain's letter being displayed on the counter, and I used my right hand to motion where the piece of paper was sitting on her blue counter. And I says, was it illegal or illegal to display that document? And she says, I have no idea. So then I explained to her that I emailed Dario Nardi back then, and he took responsibility, saying that Jim Fountain had emailed the Board of Selectmen and had handed them a copy of that document. And so she seemed to get very upset emotionally, per se, when I mentioned saying, well, you displayed that document. And I says, if a voter came in here and read that document, it would persuade them not to vote for me because Jim Fountain's document accused me of false advertising on the postcards. So I then told her about the two people, Stephanie Hadley and her former assistant town clerk, Debbie Lacasse, being involved with possibly having something to do with the tampering of my postcards before election when they were printed. Her response shocked me when she says, well, I can assure you that Debbie Lacasse didn't do it. And I just said, well, how do you know that? And then as I said, well, I have an attorney, and she says, oh, I didn't know that. And I says, well, I'm thinking about suing them both. And then she says, well, good for you. And she says, well, they'll certainly admit which one had something to do with it once you sue them. And I just said to Nancy, I just made the comment to her saying, because I wasn't expecting that comment from her, I then said, well, she worked underneath you and you were her boss and her supervisor. And I says, so if she's responsible for some wrong act, I says, doesn't that make you responsible or your office responsible? And then she says, quote, Debbie Lacasse is a big girl. She can handle herself, but she's not getting any town resources if you sue her. So I found that quite interesting for her to make that statement. So I discussed about that. I discussed about the Dario Nardi documents. I also told her about the website. Now this is where she walks away from in front of me on the counter and then goes over to a desk, and she's got a 2-liter bottle of either water or seltzer or something, or maybe it was ginger ale, but I remember the 2-liter bottle specifically, what color it was, etc. And I'm just saying this. So it turns out that she goes over to a desk and she takes some drinks out of the 2-liter bottle, and she then stands in between her chair. So she slides her chair away from the desk, and she's standing with the chair closest to me. She's standing there than her desk, and she's turning facing me. So she says, well, if you're not suing my office, then I just don't like all this negativity. So then she starts going on this tangent about me telling her negativity, and she says, well, do you have any other further business that I can help you with as the town clerk? And I says, as of right now, I don't see me suing you that you've done anything wrong, but I says, but the lady that worked for you might have done something wrong. And I says, and other people in the town did something wrong, and other people, including the town employees, know about it, including the selectmen. And I says, that includes Dario Nardi. And I says that Dario Nardi used town council to get advice to put that letter in all the town offices, including yours, to trick people not to vote for me. And I says, how legitimate is that? And then she paused for a second and then said, well, that goes on Dario. What did he have to say? And I just said, well, he didn't say anything because he's not talking to me anymore. And I says, but taxpayer money was spent to swindle the election, which to me is criminal fraud of defrauding the voters. And then she just sat there and didn't say anything to that comment. And she goes, how is it criminal? I says, well, if you were defrauded and voted for the other guy because of a document that was displayed that was not true and you didn't vote for me, I says, that's fraud. And she just says, oh. So in other words, when I told her that I already sought legal advice about what was fraud and what wasn't, she changed her tune. So here's where things started getting interesting. So I ended up discussing. So she starts saying that this is making, she didn't say the word uncomfortable, but she just says, I don't like you telling me all this negativity because my office is not negative. I like to hear happy things, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes on saying, well, is there anything else I can help you with as far as, regarding town clerk business? So she's obviously trying to get me to just shut up and go out the door. So I says, well, I apologize if I'm making you feel uncomfortable, which she didn't use that word, but I did. And then I said, Okay, I'm just going to explain one more thing. I says, you know that anti-Mike Baril hate website? And she claims that she has no idea what it is, even though we discussed it. She says, well, I don't know anything about it. I wasn't involved in that. And as the town clerk, I wouldn't get involved. And I just said, I says, well, the owner of that who used his credit card was Mark Chase. I says, the webmaster was Mark Chase and James Gagner, who was running against me for selectman and is now chairman of the Board of Selectmen. And I says, and also responsible for that website, who was listed as a contact, was Chief Spakowski. And as soon as I mentioned those three names, her facial expression went to a pissed off look, and she just looked at me, didn't say, well, she just looked at me with this expression, and then said, again, I don't like you spreading negativity in my office. And she didn't say please leave, but she was about ready to spit it out of her mouth. So as soon as I mentioned those three names and I had who was responsible for that website, she immediately, her attitude changed, and she went from, giving me the look of get the hell out before I call the police or whatever. So I just said again and again, another statement to myself, to her, saying, I just want you to be in the loop and be informed so that when there is a lawsuit, you'll know who is responsible for that website, and that those municipal employees engaged in inappropriate behavior prior to the campaign and could have used taxpayer money to defraud the voters. And then she said, again, I don't want no negativity, you should stop. And then I said to her, in response to that statement she just said, was, well, it has to do with your office because you're in charge of voting lists, voting procedures, following the Mass General laws, and all that stuff. And I says, I says again, or maybe I didn't use the word again, but I just says, I'd like to still file a complaint. And then she says, I'm not taking your complaint. And then she says, well, since you're going to have an attorney and sue, I would just do it that way and the truth should come out that way. Was I surprised she said that? Not really. But was I shocked the way she reacted by saying, Debbie Lacasse had nothing to do with it? And I just said to her, I says, well, you just said that you don't know anything about the postcard error, which she told me in 2015 when I confronted her about the postcard error, that she says that Debbie Lacasse, her assistant, knew exactly who it was. And she says, well, if you ever have the lawyer talk to Debbie Lacasse, and Debbie will be able to fill you in on who it was. So I find it funny how now she's either friends with Debbie Lacasse, but now she seemed to give me the impression that she'll sell Debbie Lacasse down the toilet, and says, well, she's a big girl, she can handle herself, and she's not going to get anything town council spending money, nothing. So, but she did admit that Debbie Lacasse was under the direction of her as the town clerk, and their office is responsible for voting matters, maybe not enforcing criminal activity, or not in, she probably doesn't have the authority to do anything against the chief of police or the police officers or Bob Downing for stealing other people's campaign signs. But I wanted to go there, and my point of this discussion where there was, and that's why I'm doing this video to document it if it's ever used in court, is that on this day and this time I confronted her and told her I wanted to file a complaint. I wanted her to investigate the matters. I told her that her office, I told her I wasn't accusing her, but I used Dario as the scapegoat, saying, your office knowingly, which could possibly be criminal defrauding the voters, and I keep using that statement because it could be fraud, considered fraud maybe, I don't know, that her office knowingly displayed a document, and I specifically told her that Jim Fountain was present with Turley Publications in the press conference that Friday at noon or 1 p.m., whatever it was, one of those two times, that Friday. And Jim Fountain knew that Turley fessed up about the error on the postcard, and that Jim Fountain's letter that she was displaying on her blue counter was inappropriate on behalf of an ethical issue within the town clerk's office, And I says, and Jim Fountain knew the letter was not true because Turley fessed up to their involvement in screwing up the postcards. So I says, you in the other town offices knowingly displayed that document for another week, and I told her maybe 5 or 6 days, 7 days maybe, knowingly displayed it, and I says, none of you removed it, except when I confronted you, Nancy Lowell, and said that that document shouldn't be displayed in her office, that she physically picked it up that day and put it in the shredder in front of me. The shredder was in the back of her office by the wall, by the town treasurer's, somewhere back there, around that corner, past her desk. So her facial expression at the very end when I was just grabbing my stuff and leaving the meeting was, she was not pissed off at me, but she was very uncomfortable talking about her friends, which I didn't accuse her of being these people being her friends, but she now knows she was very uncomfortable with me exposing the truth. And she says, I do my job to the best of my ability, and she then claims to my face, other people don't influence my job, and I would never do anything wrong for the people in this town. So maybe that's a true statement. If that is, then she was swindled and she's a victim like I am, meaning that she had no idea that these people were doing this. But I think that when I mentioned, and she said back to me, she says, I don't give a, quote, crap if Mark Chase, Jim Gagner, and Spakowski had something to do with that website. That has nothing to do with the town clerk's office. But I just says, but they used the town internet connection and town taxpayer resources to commit fraud, which I'm just making you aware of because you're the office that I should be complaining to. And again, she refused to take her complaint. She refused to have any further discussion. She didn't want anything to do with any more conversation about it and was basically politely hinting me to just shut up and leave her office, because she kept saying, do you have any more business for my office? Do you have anything that I can help you with? If not, then we're done. And she only said I'm done once. So who knows? She's already called the police on me the last time in 2012 or 13 for buying a street listing book and reported me as a suspicious male in the building that I was in her office and bought a street listing book, and that a resident from Uxbridge was obviously suspicious buying a street listing book from Warren. So I was going to ask her, I actually had the paperwork with me now that I bought another street listing book, and I have the receipt to prove it with her signature on it. And I was going to ask her saying, why would you call the police when I buy a street listing book and you report me as suspicious, which means you're telling the police an incorrect statement to put wrong information in the computer when I just bought a street listing book. So I didn't even bring that up because I wanted her to, that's Warren police talking. So I wanted her to give me her personal opinion and give me my records of my records across the voter registration list, and also give me my street listing book before I started discussing the other stuff, because I didn't want her to retaliate and say, oh, I can't find your records request. So in other words, I wanted to get what I needed out of her first, and then I basically says, well, I'll discuss the other stuff later. So that's it. I'm going to end the video. It's now 4:30 p.m. on Thursday. I'm actually on Route 20 in Sturbridge, just approaching over by the time reference stamp, going by 175, 171 Charlton Road, which is Route 20 in Sturbridge, passing Stop and Shop Gasoline, which is number 149, and approaching the Walmart Plaza on the left, which is the center of Hobb Books. So that's where I am now. I just wanted that on video to prove where my geographic location is, that I'm out of Warren by now. So I'm assuming, just to close the video, I guess I'll say she's definitely going to make some phone calls, and she's going to talk to some people, I'm sure, about me being there and explain what I said. I really don't care because it's public information. I told her I did some YouTube videos And she says, I don't know anything about YouTube videos. She claims she doesn't even know how to get on the internet on the computer, is what she made a statement to me. But I bet you she's staying away from it because she knows that they're all caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and she doesn't want to implicate herself. So when I left there, I says, I apologize. I didn't use the words, I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. At the end, I just says, well, I just wanted to bring this to your attention, and I feel you should know the truth. Now, I did say that because I wanted her to know that was the reason why I was discussing this with her, if she's mad at me for telling her this. So that's all. So I was just giving her the opportunity, saying I don't have to share this with you, but I am, as a courtesy, so you know what's going on. So it would make her think that if Debbie Lacasse gets sued, or Turley Putler, or somebody else gets sued that's her friend, that she'll then realize that she could be implicated in anything that she could have done if she did do anything. Maybe she didn't do anything. Maybe these people did the wrong things and didn't tell her. Maybe she knew these people were doing these things and she just plays dumb and pretends she doesn't know. I don't know. Whatever. I told her twice, at least twice, I'm not upset at you. I don't hate you. I even used the words, I don't hate Dario Nardi, but I just said, why would Dario, using these words, why would Dario do something so stupid to use taxpayer money to find out if you can display a false document that accused me of false advertising, when Jim knew at some point that his letter was not true and that Turley screwed up the postcards. And I wanted her to know that my postcards was screwed up, and I did pull out the postcard. I did point to the statement on the bottom of it. So she's well aware of the serious, and I told her, I used the word seriousness at least once. I says, well, I'm telling you this because this is a serious matter that is now going to come forward. And I told her I felt that the voters in 2014 and 2015 were defrauded criminally and civilly by people that are municipal employees.